We continue to follow breaking news. Congressman Mike Johnson has now been elected to serve as the next Speaker of the House.
Now, this follows more than 3 weeks without a House leader and 4 different nominees.
To my colleagues, I want to thank you all for the trust that you have instilled in me to lead us in this historic and unprecedented moment that we're in. The challenge before us is great, but the time for action is now, and I will not let you down.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, a Louisiana Republican, won by a vote of 220 to 209. All House Republicans present for the ballot cast their votes for Mike Johnson.
CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins us now. You joined us through the vote. There was this audible sigh of relief from the chamber among Republicans when they finally found their man. But there's been some damage done. The House has been without a speaker for more than 3 weeks. How significant is this moment, and how big is the task ahead?
Not only was this unprecedented in U.S. history, the ousting of a speaker, then the voting on a replacement to that speaker, but this was an unprecedented story with plot twists. Mike Johnson emerging from obscurity, even among his fellow Republicans, and there are U.S. senators in this building who don't know who Mike Johnson is, or didn't until today, and becomes second in line to the presidency and the most powerful figure in the U.S. House of Representatives, now in command of half of America's legislative branch. It's a story with plot twists. Mike Johnson has quite a learning curve ahead of him. He goes from a backbench Republican with a low-ranking leadership post to the CEO, the man in charge of the entirety of the chamber, his Republican conference, and the administration of the daily blocking and tackling of running the U.S. Capitol. We expect his first news conference as House Speaker momentarily. Perhaps he'll talk about the priorities ahead, because there are some big tasks in short order. Something has to be done to avoid a government shutdown November 17th, and the Congress flirted very closely with one a few weeks ago. There has to be decisions on foreign aid to Israel and to Ukraine, and on all those bills that have been stacking up because they were difficult to pass by the last speaker. They're now in Mike Johnson's lap, effective immediately.
You know, second in line to the presidency, but just yesterday, most Americans didn't even know who Mike Johnson was. And in fact, when we're talking about yesterday, House Majority Whip Tom Emmer was actually the GOP nominee for Speaker. Scott, what was it about Mike Johnson that actually propelled him to victory? How did we get to this point? Was it really just the right person at the right time?
A unique moment in time, and everything lined up for this congressman from the western part of Louisiana. First of all, there is an almost palpable exhaustion, frustration, anger, and embarrassment among members of the House because of this 3-week standoff. There was an urgency of now to get somebody in place to end all the animosity and end the stalemate. But also, he hits a sweet spot for this moment in time. He is a conservative, an unbridled conservative who has opposed abortion rights, who denied the results of the 2020 election. There's certainly a constituency of House Republicans who check those boxes, but also because he's lesser known, because he's not a known figure, he may play well in the short term in some of those districts where moderate Republicans may have been skittish about supporting a conservative. No doubt in suburban Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and New York, the constituents may have no earthly idea who Mike Johnson is, making it easier for those representatives to support him today on the House floor. Just an unprecedented confluence of events that Mike Johnson experienced and has now been lifted by as the new U.S. Speaker of the House.
And Scott, I wonder how that lack of visibility and the lack of leadership roles will hamper the new House Speaker as he not only builds his own staff, but gets the Republican caucus, a fractured one, behind him as they pass resolutions for government funding, the appropriations bills. We know the first thing they'll do is issue a resolution in support of Israel. That's kind of the easy stuff. But how challenging is his job now that he has to get Republicans together and the business of the country needs to be done?
In a word, it's going to be wild. And his lack of leadership positions and apparatus, maybe why he has this job. There were Republicans who wanted an outsider and a change agent. They dismissed all the other Republican leaders when they gave a shot at becoming the next speaker. They wanted somebody from the outside. So his lack of leadership experience and infrastructure is why he has this position now. But now he has to do the job. If somebody walked you up to the executive suite at your office, how ready would you be to man the entire corporate ship, the entire company, and all its offices nationwide or worldwide? That's now his job. He has to quickly staff up, which means find experts in all the areas he's got to administer. He's got to find a fundraising apparatus. He needs to raise tens of millions of dollars in a very short period of time. And he has to fill the shoes of a House Speaker, not knowing yesterday he'd be having to do so. His wife wasn't even here today for the vote because this happened on such short notice. That's Mike Johnson's reality now. There's a very brief honeymoon period, I believe he'll be given by both parties to just get situated, but the political blood sport that has been the U.S. House in 2023 is about to resume.
But it is interesting, he got full support from every Republican member. And he articulated some of the issues that he wants to prioritize after being sworn in. But with that budget deadline looming, with the possibility of another government shutdown, that issue wasn't resolved. It did in the previous House Speaker. How is he going to manage these things, Scott?
Well, the 3-week paralysis may actually help him uniquely in this way. I talked to a number of conservative Republicans, members of the Freedom Caucus, as they walked to the chamber for today's vote, and I got a sense from them, and I actually got some quotes from them indicating they're more open to one of those short-term continuing resolutions to punt matters down the field a few weeks or a few months. They opposed that when Kevin McCarthy tried to do it. They are now open to it, in part because they recognize they just squandered 3 weeks of time that were needed to avoid a government shutdown. So Mike Johnson might be walking in here with a better hand of cards than Kevin McCarthy had on that divisive issue of whether to keep the government open by cutting a short-term deal with Democrats.
And Scott, while you're speaking with us, we have a shot from outside the Capitol where Tom Emmer from Minnesota is speaking. We think we're about to hear from the new House Speaker as well, Mike Johnson, in a moment. When that happens, we'll bring it to our viewers. I think we see now Steve Scalise stepping up
a parade of failed candidates.
Well, but also the leadership, right? The remaining leadership in the Republican caucus. Scott, I'm wondering, comparing what we heard from Mike Johnson in his speech in the chamber, which seemed to be very middle of the road, Democrats were jumping up and applauding, what we should listen for in this speech outside the Capitol that perhaps is for a domestic local audience.
He'll be getting gradually edgier with each set of remarks. Now that he's out of the chamber and surrounded by his own party and his own supporters, he may take a harder line on some of his priorities moving forward. You expect to hear him talk a lot about border security. It's been a big talking point for Republicans. It's been a big issue across America, and they believe it's an issue they're going to campaign on and that the Biden administration is not handling effectively or significantly. So that's something you're going to hear Mike Johnson talk about. But what you're watching is an interesting political moment. It's a unification tour. It's all the people who tried to be Speaker but couldn't become Speaker. It was Tom Emmer. It's Steve Scalise. This is a unification tour in a party that very much needs some unification. This march that they've taken together over 3 months left some damage in its wake. There is an animosity that has formed between members of the House through this process, through this standoff. That's not going to go away tomorrow. Mike Johnson will have to try to solve some of that, bridge some of those gaps. But I can tell you, just over the past 24 hours, I've talked to Kevin McCarthy multiple times. I've talked to Matt Gaetz of Florida multiple times. They're still calling each other out and attacking each other for getting this whole situation launched a few weeks ago with the ouster of McCarthy. You don't just solve that problem instantaneously. Mike Johnson is inheriting a fractured, narrow majority, and they're trying to take a first step here to show unity. We'll see if unity is actually possible when the business resumes.
Yeah, well, as Errol points out, they are still members of leadership with the exception of Kevin McCarthy. But it was notable that Mike Johnson started his speech before he took the oath of office really praising McCarthy so much, saying you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who loves this institution more or has contributed more to it. All of that seems to go to that idea that he's trying to bring together these different parts of the Republican Party. Scott, you foresee, even as Kevin McCarthy and Matt Gaetz are still trading barbs with one another, that may remain limited between those two and still allow for Johnson to have leadership control of this caucus?
Ultimately, Mike Johnson inherits all of it, not just some of the responsibilities, not just the technical responsibilities of being House Speaker, but the unspoken ones. He's now the leader of his party in half of Congress. Keep in mind, Republicans don't have the White House, they don't have the Senate. He now is the highest-ranking Republican in government. Yesterday, he was a backbench member of the U.S. House from Louisiana with no earthly idea he was about to become second in line to the presidency.
And now, Scott, you see,
an awful lot to do in a short period of time.
Apologies for the interruption, but you see the new House Speaker has taken to the microphone. Let's listen.
Serve the American people. Steve Scalise represents so much in our home state of Louisiana. One of the things he truly represents is perseverance and hope. And as he was talking here just a moment ago, I was reminded of the scripture that says suffering produces perseverance, perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. What we need in this country is more hope. The people have lost their faith in our institutions. Their faith is at an all-time low. And one of the reasons they've lost it is because the Congress, over the years, has not delivered for the American people well enough. We're in the majority right now. We've gone through a little bit of suffering. We've gone through a little bit of character building. And you know what it's produced? More strength, more perseverance, and a lot of hope. And that's what we're about to deliver to the American people. Yeah. We're going to speak with clarity and conviction and consistency to the American people. We're going to tell them what we're for, what agenda we are pursuing, and why it is best for every American, why it will give them more liberty, opportunity, and security. We're going to speak to that clearly. We're going to act consistently, and we're going to exhibit two things here: trust and teamwork. And this group will deliver for the American people. I said it in the chamber, and I will say it here. We're going to govern well. And I think the people are going to be very pleased with those results. We're so grateful. I'm so grateful and so humbled to have gotten a unanimous vote on the floor by all of my colleagues here. We went through a lot to get here, but we are ready to govern, and that will begin right away. You've all heard me talk a lot today, and I'm not going to belabor the point because the sun is bright and it's too warm for the fall. But I'll say this. We're going to dispense with all the usual ceremonies and celebrations that traditionally follow a new speakership because we have no time for either one. The American people's business is too urgent in this moment. The hour is late, the crisis is great. In America, we hear you. And we are reporting again, as I said in there, to our duty stations. That will begin in just a few moments. This entire group is going to go back to the House floor, and we are going to pass our resolution in support of the nation of Israel, our closest ally in the Middle East. You're going to see an aggressive schedule in the days and weeks ahead. You're going to see Congress working as hard as it's ever worked, and we are going to deliver for the American people. I'm grateful for this opportunity. I want to thank you for being patient with us, and I promise you it'll be worth it. Yeah. God bless you. God bless you. Yeah. Let's go to work.